and thank you to the organisers for inviting me here. I'll just briefly comment on our involvement in the strategy, and then I want to move to look at positive aspects of the strategy, challenges that remain, and conclude with a couple of recommendations that do echo a number of the points we've heard already. EPLO has been involved in the Peace and Security Partnership as the civil society contact point on the European side. And in that process, we've attended meetings, we've tried to arrange participation of African organisations and civil society, and we've produced a number of statements and comments on the strategy. If I may speak frankly, we have tried to participate constructively, but at times it has been a frustrating process. And that is not because of the attitude of the officials involved in this, who I think have always been open and willing to incorporate civil society and have made great effort for civil society to be involved. I think the challenges come from some of the political challenges attached to the strategy as a whole, to some of the implementation challenges that have been discussed. And I would agree with Ibrahim Akane that the question is not one of capacity. And I agree with much of the analysis put forward by the Istituto here, but the one point on which I would also disagree is that in the problem analysis saying that capacity is missing in African civil society, because that's not our experience at all. So to move to positive aspects of the strategy, I think many people would agree that the strategy itself and its intentions are good and remain relevant. The principles underlying it are important. The need at this point in time to rethink the relationship between Europe and Africa is crucial. The idea of setting up something that is more of a partnership than a donor-beneficiary relationship is also, I think, very welcome. And to try and develop a relationship that goes beyond funding, I think is also very important. Secondly, the key principle of supporting the African peace and security architecture is also very important, and we've constantly heard that to be welcomed by partners in Africa, the idea of supporting African responses. The final, I think, positive issue is the focus on regional integration as a peace-building strategy. This is something that appears in the European security strategy. I think it's something that the European Union has at its heart, because the European Union itself is a peace project set up to promote regional integration, peace through regional economic integration. And it's something that's sometimes difficult to apply in other regions. And I think within the joint Africa-EU strategy, as many speakers have said, that model of regional integration may now need to be transferred to the sub-regional level rather than the exclusive focus on the African Union. It's still the principle of regional integration to promote peace and stability, but one that is maybe more appropriately applied at a different level. So, moving to the second point, remaining challenges. From our side, I think some of these challenges need to be addressed, and particularly because of the crucial funding decision on the table, the proposal has been put forward that €1 billion be put into a Pan-African programme to support implementation of the joint Africa-EU strategy. And I think some of the challenges already mentioned may need to be addressed before that money will be, I think, wisely spent. Challenges. One issue already noted that we've seen is the question of political commitment, and commitment beyond the team of dedicated and understaffed at times officials working on the strategy. I'm talking on the European side because that's what we focus on. Now, political commitment, could this strategy be a vehicle for collective and effective European action? I think this is how it should be judged. That will require member state involvement, member state provision of resources, and member state political involvement. Our experience in the implementation teams and the JEGs has been that there has been limited interest and involvement of the European member states. And sometimes this seems like a classic example of member states signing up to very idealistic principles, but not dedicating the resources for that implementation, not just financial resources, but their own political time and involvement. Related to this question is the continued existence of conflicting, undermining framework strategies, policies for EU relations with Africa at both regional, continental, and national levels. So, for instance, there are a number of different EU frameworks, which had been mentioned in the study, but we see EU member states still active with significant bilateral actions. Our view is that in many parts of Africa, in order to have a positive impact on conflict, Europe needs to act collectively. And the continued persistence of bilateral member state activities is problematic. On the other hand, member states need the EU to be effective in order to unite behind it. The question I want to throw out is, can this strategy be the vehicle for collective European action? Our question is, perhaps the newly developed regional strategies that the European External Action Service has started producing are better vehicles. So, for instance, the strategy for security and development in the Sahel region, the Horn of Africa strategy. In the pipeline, we hear there's a Gulf of Guinea strategy. Should we be sort of backing that horse rather than this strategy? That's a question. Final challenges. The strategy itself, it has been claimed that the strategy is fine, the problem is implementation. I think there is a need in some ways to update the strategy. What I want to mention is changes in the nature of conflict that have occurred since 2007 when the strategy was originally developed, and changes in the evidence we have about how to tackle conflict. Without going into details, new security threats, organised criminal activity, playing a key role across the African continent in peace and security issues, types of conflict, intrastate rather than interstate conflict, governance challenges as a key aspect undermining long-term peace building, as has been mentioned, which leads to the need for civil society involvement in building accountable institutions. Now, all of this could be accommodated within the strategy, but I think those contemporary understanding and analysis of conflict and peace and how to build peace needs to be brought in. In addition to this, I think there are questions increasingly about the limit. Yeah, I see time. I'm moving to my conclusions. There are increasingly questions about the limitations of military response to conflict. And the amount of funding within the strategy, the African Peace Facility, has focused on peacekeeping and military response. So I think there are questions about the need to support preventive and civilian actions, and including something, for instance, the idea of infrastructures for peace, which has developed within Kenya and West Africa, and something that could be supported. So I'm going to conclude now. And my conclusion will simply be a very brief list of recommendations. Sorry, I'm a chair's nightmare, but this will be 1 minute. So, and I'm happy to then go into discussion on these issues. First point, we think there should be a greater focus at partnership level. This will promote civil society involvement, looking at the content and the actions on particular issues rather than the framework as a whole. Yeah. It's difficult to engage civil society, and particularly our very busy African colleagues, when it's an overall discussion of the strategy. When it's about specific peace and security actions, easier. Second, support civil society peacebuilding work in Africa. Here, the 4 areas mentioned, dialogue, conflict analysis, early warning, mediation and conflict resolution, absolutely. Excellent work being done. Use the strategy to support that. Move away from training and capacity building. In our view, this is not needed. And the idea of us as European NGOs going out to train and build the capacity of WANEP, for instance, is laughable. So move away from that somewhat neo-colonial capacity building focus. Third recommendation, give priority to cheaper, more effective, non-military peace and security work with a preventive focus, such as building up peace infrastructures in Africa. Fourth recommendation, civil society involvement in the African peace and security architecture as exists. So look at civil society involvement in those projects that are being funded. The Eco-WARN example has already been mentioned, but civil society could feasibly be involved in any of the 5 main strands of work. Link between peace and governance, I won't say any more, this has been mentioned already by other speakers. Simplification of procedures, flexibility. For civil society to be involved, we need to bring in the best civil society experts, regardless of to whom they're affiliated, which channel provides them, anything else. It should be civil society participation in substance, on the basis of expertise. In our experience, this is the only way that dialogue involvement of civil society works. And finally, I think the question is not necessarily just related to implementation of the strategy. It's to do with the strategy itself becoming more effective, contemporary, relevant, and how it relates to the overall challenges of EU external action, which were mentioned at the beginning. Thank you.
Yeah.